Welcome to another Let's Discuss, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about unreal beauty expectations. As always, I'm your host, entrepreneur, and stress management coach, Freeman Beals, and beside me is Keenan Hart, mental health advocate and the co-founder of telehealth company Francis. Again, we're going to talk about unreal beauty expectations. It's a big topic. There's going to be a lot of stuff in here. So I encourage you, if you can, grab a pen or paper. You might want to write some of this stuff down. First off, Keenan, this topic was, interestingly enough, something that came up about some stuff you were talking about. And I'm curious on why it's such a big, important topic for you.
Dude, I mean, like my biggest, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Unrealistic or beauty expectations are something that I think has to do a lot with what I'm passionate about, and it's mental health, right? I think that we are living in such an interesting time where social media, the social influences, all the things that we see around us are having such impacts on our mental health when it comes to how we view ourselves. And I think a lot of this unrealistic expectation comes from the lens of looking at society through like a tiny peephole, right? I heard something on social media the other day. They were like, listen, something people don't understand is that the people you see posting on social media are not normal. These are the people who are either skilled, they are gifted, they are confident enough, or maybe they are just a little bit crazy enough to put out their opinion on social media. And so the majority of people who are on social today are the people who are viewing, not contributing. And so we see only the people who are contributing, which is a tiny percentage of our society. And we see how good they look. We see how in shape they are. We see what type of clothes they have, what type of filters they're layering on top of themselves. And we automatically think, is that what everybody looks like? And maybe when you don't have that natural contrast, you start to believe it. And so that's kind of a societal, I guess, undercurrent that kind of pushes forward these unrealistic expectations for beauty. But I would love to kind of get your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very in tune with what you're saying. What we see on social media is not necessarily the full truth. And the problem with that, in my opinion, is what happens is it limits people from living to their potential because they think, oh, only people who look like that, only people who accomplish those things, they're the only type of people who can have that level of success. And that's just not the case. And the problem is we only ever see people after they've reached a certain level. So a great example of this is Jeff Bezos, who, sure, now he looks like, Mr. Clean kind of on steroids, right? But if you look at some of the older pictures of Jeff Bezos, right? The bald spot, the thinning hair, Elon Musk is the same thing. You're seeing an inflated version of who that person is. And that is the issue because it, like I said, it stops people from living up to their full potential. And I think that's a real risk of it here.
I totally agree. Something that I want to kind of reference was I think now we're getting at a point in society where the macro is starting to see the negative impacts on our communities, on our countries, on our continents, on society in general. And so we're starting to see governmental bodies start taking steps towards limiting some of the misinterpretation about what might be real and what might be fake.
Mm-hmm.
A great example is on social media the other day, I saw a post, and I'm going to make sure that I say this correctly, but France is proposing a bill to force influencers to disclose if they've used filters on their photos.
Wow, that's important.
So that's very
insanely
interesting to me.
important.
Very interesting to me that the fact that we've gotten to the point in society where we continuously present ourselves with filters on our face, that now we're starting to recognize and look around after we've kind of lost the mystical awe that other people are also looking at these individuals like it's the real them. And so I start to kind of worry about what is the macro long-term effect. And I think we've seen this. There was a documentary a couple of years ago. It was called the oh man, I forget what it was called. It was on Netflix. It was about social media, and it was called The Social Dilemma.
Dilemma.
What it was called. Yes. And we talk about kind of the fact that when people are presenting with a mask on consistently, it goes back to your point that everybody thinks that that's the normal. But I worry about what are the impacts on our own mental health that influencer who consistently presents himself or herself with a filter on their face. Do they start to have that voice in the back of their head that says nobody's going to accept me if I show up as my real self? Am I making short-term decisions to put out content that I know that's going to get the likes and engagement and all the comments, but that doesn't align with who I am? There are just so many facets to this conversation. That's why it's so interesting to me.
It's funny that you bring that up because that's super apparent in especially the younger adult space. It always has been. I mean, beauty standards were set a long time ago for marketing reasons, and I'm going to get into that a little bit here because those are some powerful numbers. But I also, because I love my data, they did some research on teens who had spent, again, I also like staggering data, 30 minutes a day on social media. An extra 30 minutes a day would have increased feelings of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and of all those things, self-image, which would then lead into this farther problem, which is, of course, unhealthy eating behavior.
Mm, I believe that. I mean, the thing that I think about when I think about the younger generation is the relationship that we have built with technology is incredibly beneficial, but it can be incredibly dangerous as well. And this is what I mean by that. When I think of my cell phone, right, I think of this thing as being a super tool that gives me access to all the information in the world. And I also think about it in the lens of this thing can feed me no wrong. And when I think about the defense mechanisms that we've built up through things like social media, we almost trust these devices way too much. And because Instagram, TikTok, social medias are built on an algorithm to keep us engaged, we almost don't have a defense mechanism or a filter that is between here and my brain. And so we always get fed
Mm.
information that is not beneficial towards us nor our long term happiness. So think about a kid, right? 10, 15, let's say 13 to be on social media to 18 years old. Your brain is still developing. We're still developing the habits that help us be healthy, exercising, doing all these things. When you've built up the habit of letting this thing get too close to your brain and it can feed you whatever it wants, it's only natural to start perceiving that reality that it's feeding us as being true. And so, yes, if I don't look like the cover model, or if I'm not 14 and shredded and I'm not 18 years old and have a Lamborghini already, I feel like I'm not doing what I should be doing. And maybe I'm not living up to, my full potential, which is not true. And that's
Mm.
where I think that relationship is so dangerous because no one's taught them. Like I talked about in one of our previous conversations, you and I came before the time of these devices. They emerged in our lifetime. So we still have a reference of the before time and the after. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And I think part of that has got to do with volume, right? Like you said it there, it's all the time now. And it actually made me think of a couple things. Before it was always, I mean, Unreal Beauty expectations have always been a bit of a marketing pull. That's part of what they're doing. There's
Yeah.
a psychological issue there. That's why. But now we're getting this insane level of volume. Or before it was maybe only in magazines, TV shows, billboards. Now you've got it 24/7. But not only is it people that you can sort of disassociate with, that's a model, that's a this person. Now it's just, your average person on TikTok who's putting on a filter. Or so there's not only is it the volume of that influence is increasing, but it feels more attainable almost in a really bad way because of the people who are able to do this. And another thing that really blew me away is traditionally unreal beauty expectations has been a massive problem with females. And I want
Mhm.
to be very apparent here the fact that I understand that right now we are two white men talking about unreal beauty expectations. And I get that. So I want to be very clear here that I understand that this is a different issue when it comes to especially young females, and honestly I would say even females into their middle lives, because there's a whole thing to unpack there that I'm not going to. But I do want to be aware, because we are, men. There's an issue as well with men in unreal beauty expectations. So I wanted to dive into that, and I looked up some alarmingly scary information that anabolic steroids, because of unreal beauty expectations, there are over 1 million males in the UK reporting that they've considered or are using anabolic steroids,
Mhm.
to the point where it's now actually illegal to be, it's 14 years in jail to be found that you're using and distributing anabolic steroids.
Wow.
Yeah, out of 500 gym users, 75% male gym users, 75% have considered steroid use, and 96% were unhappy with how their bodies looked.
So let's talk about this. I want to reverse really quick to kind of the evolution of social media. And you used a reference of being able that discernment that we could create before. The discernment came
Mm,
because back in the day, Instagram was a timeline or a feed of all of your friends. And then you'd have to go to the For You page to be able
yes.
to see other people. Now the algorithms have been designed to keep you on the platforms, meaning they're going to serve you other people's content, people you don't follow, but content that's getting traction, likes, and views. Now, when we go on social media, I don't see my friends who look like me and who are in the
Mm,
same type of shape as me. I see the guys who are huge in the gym. I see the girls who are super athletic and might be a little bit curvaceous. I see all of the people, once again, that I am not in alignment with. And so my feed on Instagram, and I'm just going to go check this out really quick. I'm going to go to my For You page while we're sitting here and use this as a real example. Now, on my For You page, because I'm into fitness, the first four images that I see on here is some guy who is gigantic, who is super muscular. I see a girl who is flaunting her curves. I see another guy who's doing muscle ups in the gym. I see all these people who are pushing 400 pounds on the bench press. And if you look at a statistic analysis of that, if you can push 225 pounds, you are in the top 1% of the strongest humans
wow.
on earth. Two plates,
Really?
245s, 245s. If you can push 225, you are top 1% of people who go to the gym
Wow.
today. So the person who is pushing 400 pounds on the bench press, who is huge and in the gym, what percentage are they? But yet I'm comparing myself to that top 0.004 percenter. You know what I mean? So it's like there's obviously
Wow.
a system in place that also kind of reinforces it. So, yes, if I was a guy who wanted to be more attractive in the eyes of creating value in society, I would think that I would have to be the guy who's shredded. I would think that I have to be 2%, 4 or 5% body fat with huge amounts of muscle on my frame to be able to be the guy who can win the attention of these girls who are also on these platforms looking at these people. And so it's almost like a cyclical cycle that continues to feed itself that gets regular people in trouble. But then I think if we did an audit and account of all the regular people who are out there, we would recognize there's a lot more of them than there are the people who are in amazing shape. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
That is alarming, first off, and incredibly surprising. I want to hammer down for people why this is so important
Hmm.
because you hear us saying things like, oh, it increases anxiety and depression, but eating disorders are among the deadliest of mental illnesses. And this is going to wow people, but it's second only to opioid addiction.
Wow.
So, in the date, I don't have the date here, but in the US, it resulted in 10,200 deaths each year on average, eating disorders. So,
Wow.
it's not that, and I don't want to say that other mental illnesses aren't a big concern because they really are depression, burnout, all of these things. But when they lead into eating disorders, it's especially done because of body dysmorphia.
Hmm.
It is an incredibly dangerous and devastating mental illness to have to that
100%.
degree. And I want people to really be aware of that, of how impactful this really is.
And that comes in many different forms as well. Like when I grew up, I would think of eating disorder as being anorexia, as being bulimia, right? Things like that.
Mm,
But when you're in a world where it seems like you're fed consistent information, I'm going to go back to the relationship we have with our device, right? And we have no control over what we're seeing. Often, I know in my past experience, I've looked at controlling the things that I can control in my life. And one of those things is what food I eat, right? So it either
mm,
comes out of a scarcity of eating food, so you want to be skinny and look like everybody else, or maybe you're just tired at the end of the day from one of our last conversations, right? We talk about decision fatigue. Maybe I don't have the ability to withstand the impulse to kind of feel comfortable. And now I'm eating, I'm overeating, and I'm binging food. And that only contributes back to the fact of now I might be disappointed with myself. Maybe I'm packing on a couple extra pounds. Maybe I'm now out of more alignment with what I'm seeing on social media, and it just feeds into itself. You know what I mean? Like it's so scary. And you are so right by saying that it is so serious.
yeah,
It is so
it's a big
serious.
problem. And I like that you touched on that. People can start thinking about what do I have control over? I know for a lot of people that's really helpful. I know for some people I've seen that it's part of the reason that they have. I can't remember who it was. Somebody at a podcast I was listening to had that as their issue. It was the one thing they could control was
Hmm.
what they could eat, and it actually was part of the reason that they, ended up being anorexic. The big thing that I think people need to start being aware of, and we've talked about this a lot, but it's getting away from this, right? And being aware of who you surround yourself with. I think that's a big kind of antidote to this problem is put your phone down, talk to your friends, get out there with real everyday people and just chat with them and get used to being around other people and get off of your phone because there's that super common saying, you are who you surround yourself with. So start surrounding yourself with people who appreciate kind of who you are and not who social media is.
I agree. And you build so many good habits by being in rooms with real people. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like a great example is we're going to go back to the social media thing. It's like, yes, you are going to see a top 1%, a top half percentile of society when you're on social, but that also is when you're by yourself and you've got your
yeah.
headphones in and you're sitting on your couch. But if you look around at the people who are around you, that should be a telling tale of what everything really is in real life. Not
Mm,
everybody is shredded. Not everybody is so curvaceous and so, thick with two C's that it's ridiculous that you're going to get 100,000 likes on, Instagram or whatever else. You need to kind of ground ourselves and surround ourselves, like you said, with the people who can lift us up and give us a real glimpse of what's going on in society as well. And so, like, you just hit that right on the head.
yeah. And I think the other thing that we've talked a lot about these people who are at this 1%. And I watched a really powerful TED talk actually this morning from a model. And I encourage everybody to go check this out once you're done here. It's called Looks Aren't Everything. Believe me, I'm a model. She came out and said, she's like, I am incredibly insecure. So even these people that we think are happy, successful, like a lot of them are insecure. And that's maybe what is driving them to do a lot of it. So it's not even the answer that you might be looking for, which I
Yeah.
think is, when you hear it come from somebody who is a professional model, it kind of opens your eyes.
I mean, I think this is a real moment for me to be kind of vulnerable, right? Because you and I are in this digital world, I would consider us one percenters because we're willing to get on camera and have these types of conversations, right? Often something that we attribute value to is engagements, likes, and comments, right?
Mm,
Recently, I had a couple posts on Instagram where I was messing around with some different content types, go over 180,000 views, couple thousand likes and stuff like that. And very seriously, I had a moment with myself last weekend where I was thinking, this is what I've been chasing the entire time. And now that I have it, it doesn't feel nearly as good as I thought it would. It's almost like when you talk about going on vacation, the process of planning the vacation and talking about where you're going to go to is awesome. And then you get on vacation, and you're like, oh, I mean, like this is decent. You know what I mean? But it's like a reminder that people have to experience is like often
mm,
we are chasing the perception of what that is going to feel like. But when we get there, it's not nearly as valuable and as palpable as we want it to be. And I've had that experience with myself, and it kind of reiterates the fact of what you've been talking about. It's like we have to be happy. We have to be okay with ourselves in our real life because once we start reaching outside of that, often that expectation is always going to let us down. It's like a thief of joy, in my opinion.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think my biggest kind of, I mean, that's incredible that you're willing to say that. First off, I just want to commend you for that because it's a lot of people would celebrate that, and you're not. You're letting people know, hey, by the way, this isn't what you think it's going to be. So
I mean, I've been chasing that 10,000 views on Instagram
yeah,
for a long time, and when my stuff blew up, I was like, "This is it." And for the first couple moments, it was great, but now when I look back on, and this is going to be me being real, I hear Gary Vaynerchuk talk about this all the time. He's like, "If you want to truly be sustainably happy, you need to do things that are in alignment with you. And if
mm,
you stick with it for long enough, the world will come back to you. You don't need to chase." And so some of the posts that I see, it's like, oh yeah, that was great. I have 215,000 plays. That's awesome. But it doesn't do anything for me because it's all happening in a world that with people who don't know me, they don't know anything about my family, nothing about my priorities, nothing about my message. And when the things I put out there get a ton of traction, it's like, oh, okay, that was great, but that wasn't what I wanted it to be. You know what I mean? And that's just me being real.
Yeah, no, man, I appreciate that. That's a powerful thing. I think, yeah, it's a reminder that it's not about the likes and the numbers.
I mean, it goes
And
I'm sorry to
yeah,
cut you
no,
off, but
go
it
ahead.
goes exactly back to your comment about the model. Like, looks aren't
Yeah.
everything. Trust me, I'm a model. I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is all the times where I've heard stories of influencers, beautiful people, male and female, who have millions of likes on their comments or on their posts, but then they end up dying by suicide because they
Mm,
were so unhappy. And it's like, I heard a saying the other day by Alex Ramosi, because we were talking about that a little bit earlier. It's like everybody says money doesn't bring you happiness. But at the same time, everybody's like, I'll go figure it out for myself. You know what I mean? It's like until you've been there and you realize it's
yeah.
true, you're always going to hold some fictitious value on these things that are intangible and really are never that fulfilling.
Mm,
So,
yeah. No, that's really good, and I think that's important to for people to remember. It is really a perception game, I think, in a lot. I mean, so much of life is a perception game, but this one especially as well, I think, is that, be aware of be aware of reality. I think that's my biggest thing that we've chatted about here is like, what is your reality and why is it so important? And I think that's what people should really start to think about.
and that takes a lot of time though. You know what I mean? That takes a
Yeah,
lot of introspective, like reflection. Because when we're distracting ourselves with this thing that
I
feels
was just
good,
gonna say,
you
yeah.
know, that's feeding us stuff, we can easily get full on air rather than
Mm.
eating things in our own life that are sustainable, that make us feel good and actually give us the energy to be our best self. Um, I just worry that so many of us are just on a diet that's not, tangible for long-term success. And I really do worry about people. So when the example I gave you of France, right, who's giving you the bill about making sure that people have a notion or a mark, an asterisk, if you will, that this was made with a filter, um, the long-term detox that I think our society is going to have to go through in order to kind of come off of the social media validation high that everybody continues to fortify for us is going to be a big one. And so the
Yeah.
pandemic was trouble, but we'll see what happens when the social media stuff doesn't have the legs it once did and we have to start looking for things that are real in our lives to get the fulfillment that we look for.
Yeah. I hope that this is part of that for people.
Hmm.
I hope that part of these very real conversations that me and you have can help people understand that you aren't what the world isn't what you see on your phone. And if these conversations help even a few people to understand that, that's enough. That's enough for me.
I agree. And that's why I want to thank you for, hosting an opportunity for us to have this conversation together, because I know other people are talking about this as well. And I hope it starts conversations for you guys.
Mm,
So like we've talked about, if there's a different perspective that you think we should be talking about or points that we missed or maybe misrepresented, we would love to hear that in the comments. So you guys can let us know what perspectives we should be thinking about rather than just the view that Freeman and Keenan look through on a daily basis, because, together we are much stronger.
yeah. No, I want to second that because I don't think that we have all the answers. And I would like to know where we can improve on it. What are we missing? Where did we skip over something that was really important and really vital? Those comments to us are really important. That level of feedback from all of you listening right now. So encourage you, drop those in on our socials if you need to DM us there. Grab the links in the comments below. If send us a DM on there, say, hey, I noticed this was kind of off on this podcast. We'd love to potentially either rectify something we did say or talk about a different point that we skipped over. As always, guys, I want to say thank you so much for spending your time and listening to the two of us. It means a lot to the both of us that you guys are here, and I hope you take this conversation outwardly to talk with other people about these very important topics as well. And join us next week for our next discussion. Thanks so much. As always, guys, go out there and make somebody else smile today.